I think we're all ready to go. We're all ready to go, Louise? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting, Monday the 15th of July, here at the Town Hall at Bexhill. I would like to welcome any of those that are online and those that are here in the gallery, which doesn't seem too full tonight. Can you please authorise me to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of June 2024 as a correct record? Thank you very much. That's moved and that's accepted. Second. Away we go. Apologies for absence. Louise, please.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any additional agenda items?
No, there are none.
Thank you. Are there any urgent decisions?
No, there are none.
Disclosure of interest and dispensation. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interests and other registrable interests, non-registrable interest in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Are there any declarations? No? Okay. So we can move forward into the first item, agenda item 6, which is the reference from last week's Overview and Scrutiny Committee Productivity Plan that was requested from the previous government. And I've got from learned advice that no doubt this will be shredded as soon as it gets anywhere, because it's just one of these things that caught us on the cusp of, I suppose, is what one could say. But I think this was brought forward last week, and I think we acknowledge the fact that officers involved had produced the Rother's own productivity plan, which is attached to the minutes. And I think in view of where we are, I'm not too certain this needs too much discussion this evening, unless anybody felt obliged to. Sam?
Only quickly to say, I think when this came to us, it was almost insultingly quite sort of, you must have areas where you can shrink and, be more efficient, despite the sort of years of efficiency savings that local councils have gone through. But actually, I think our officers and our team have made something of this and sort of turned it into something useful. But I still maintain that the least productive thing you can do is write a productivity plan. So I'm glad it will probably be shredded.
And I believe that most of the points I've covered there were in hand anyway within our own policy anyway. Right, Councillor John Barnes. John.
Yes, not all councils, unfortunately, are as efficient as we are. That's a comment on Sam. We thought at Overview and Scrutiny this was a rather useful document, and I think the Chief Executive agreed. We made one or two small comments, one about cars in rural areas. We thought they would continue to be used. What we want is green transport, in other words, hydrogen cars or electric cars, or just conceivable biofueled vehicles replacing diesels. There are a variety of possibilities. We just don't think it's realistic to think that public transport will ever take the place of them. The other one, which has been slightly missed, is, I think, what we do need to use our new building regs to do is to increase the recycling of water. I know it sounds odd to say when the weather has been as bad as it has, but we are one of the driest areas in England, and if we could actually make more use of grey water, I think it would be a very important move forward. And we felt, therefore, there ought to be a fifth point under the 4 points underwater.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you, John. Nobody else within the chamber. Paul, Councillor Paul Osborne, and thank you for leading scrutiny through this report last Monday, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's. I think we sort of made the point that it seemed ironic that we had a letter and a process to jump through for a chap who's no longer in post. But having said that, I think there's a lot of useful information on it. You know, Anna had put a lot of work into it, trying to condense it into sort of 2 or 3 sides of A4. But if you actually sort of read through it, there's a lot of good information there that we felt should go out to the public. You know, it's sort of condensed and bullet points and to the point. So it would be useful. We was hoping, you know, we would hope to get it out into the public somehow, just for people to see what we've done. You know, and one of the points I've got on my screen here is, you know, the council has purchased 49 properties costing 11.34 million, partly funded by a central government grant, to assist with homelessness. And that's the sort of information that you know, whether a government wants to shred it or not is a fact, and it's something that we've done. I feel we should be proud of. So there is useful information in it, not only for members, for the public as well. And hopefully we can get it on a website or somewhere that somebody may read it rather than it just being sort of put on the dusty shelf. Thanks, Sharon.
Yes, thank you, Paul. I think those points are worth noting, and I'm sure Lorna and the senior leadership team will take that note and look to make sure that that sort of information is out there. As you say, there are some very commendable matters that came through from there. Right, what do we need to do on that report? Remind me, do we need just to endorse the Council Productivity Plan? Yeah, okay, so if I can have someone that would move that. Oh, sorry, Catherine. Yeah, and second that. Thank you. And those in favour? That's unanimous. And I think we'll take the point that was made by Councillor Paul Osborne that the Chief Exec and senior officers will identify how best to get that into the public domain. Right, if we can move on to item 7. This is the reference that came back from overview and scrutiny last Monday regarding governance recommendations from the SIL manager. Oh, sorry, Teresa, I couldn't see you there for a moment. Would you like to just introduce this report? And we've got Aaron here in order to take any questions that were there. And I think there does need to be some degree of clarity, which I think, viewing the meeting last Monday, this item took 80 minutes and it did stray away from the purpose of the report. Since then, I know that there has been further discussions with the SIL manager and I believe, Teresa, that you have a full grasping of what the intention was of that report, and I think some clarity does need to be made before we discuss this evening.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't intend to go back through all of the history of SIL because I think everybody here, all Cabinet members, will be up to date with where we are, and I've actually also had documents today, an update from Aaron, which actually sets out again the reasoning behind the SIL decision. I mean, we know that actually the panel itself was asked to review the SIL governance in December 23, and we've also contacted, Aaron has, neighbouring authorities, processes, looking at how other people run their SIL process. Now, out of this came 5 recommendations for changes to the funding process. You will all know that through overview and scrutiny, 4 of those points were accepted and taken forward and were happily endorsed. The one that wasn't was about the Rother Infrastructure Fund. And it's the Rother Infrastructure Fund that we would like to go back to the drawing board and get endorsed as a single pot. I think the misunderstanding clearly in the meeting was about the fact that you can't look at it in isolation. You need to look at it alongside the infrastructure delivery plan, which again was a document I sent to everybody today to say this is what drives SIL going forward, because it's strategic SIL. It's not the SIL that goes to parish councils or town councils. It is just the strategic SIL pot. We know that when SIL comes in April and October, parish councils, town councils get, depending on whether they have a neighbourhood plan or not, 15% if they don't, 25% if they do, of the SIL automatically for them to consider infrastructure activities that they want to undertake locally. The 70 or 80%, depending on how much we have left, is the strategic SIL pot. That is clearly split between Rother matched funding infrastructure pot, which is split between Bexhill and rural Rother. That will not change, and that was again agreed at the overview and scrutiny. 25% therefore to them, 30% to the Climate Emergency Bonus Fund, which leaves 55%, which goes to the Rother Infrastructure Fund. That's a pot for all of the strategic drivers that we have in our delivery plan going forward. So I think what we need to be looking at tonight is whether we can just endorse it as it was prior to the changes that overview and scrutiny suggested. I think also to understand that the proposal doesn't favour infrastructure in any one area that was certainly feared by many. For example, of the 119 items listed in the IDP, 76 of these are listed with district-wide impacts, only 43 of them as having a primary impact on Bexhill. So I think the fear that actually all of the money would be transferred to projects in Bexhill is totally incorrect. We see that also with the SIL projects that we have allocated to date. So as a SIL panel, we've had 10 items, 8 out of the 10 are actually in rural Rother, and again, they were in a document that was sent out to everybody. So from the Dullarbor Pavilion down to Camber facilities, including Battle train station access, Sedleston Parish Council traffic calming, Battle Town Council. There's a whole pile of folk on here that get money from SIL when it's paid out by the SIL panel. So I just think that as a SIL panel, we need to be sure that we can cover all of the strategic requirements within the delivery plan. And that would be much simpler if all of the funds was in one pot. And as you will have seen from Aaron's update today, we've got this balance of proposals across the district, which I hope everybody's read. Plus, the SIL panel also has a good balance of councillors on it, so the recommendations for expenditure should be acceptable to all councillors.
Thank you, Teresa. Sorry, yes, Christine, Councillor Bayliss.
Yes, I'm happy to second that proposal. As a sort of one of the initial members of the SIL panel back in 2019-2020, when we devised the governance arrangements then. I mean, I understand why we did what we did, which was that obviously to try and make sure that Bexhill didn't eat up the lion's share of the SIL money. But the reality is that that's not happened, and Councillor Killeen has already outlined that, but I mean, if you look at Robertsbridge and just the Battle train station grants, you know, these are a lot of money, and it's by far gone to the rural areas. So we did it because we were obviously concerned. It's as in practice, it's not turned out to be true, or not. That's not the reality that we found, and there was added fiddling around, if you like, because then you have to sort of via money from one pot to the other pot. So it makes sense to join the pots together, and so I'm very happy to second that.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Were there any other comments? Catherine.
Just an observation, really, that perhaps the reason that what we all feared was that Bexhill would suck the money in onto big projects is that we were operating under the old rules which were working so successfully.
Thank you for that comment. The interesting thing which disappointed me last Monday was that there were comments doubting the integrity of the SIL panel and also officers. And I've since spoken with Aaron and Craig on the basis that there were several members that perhaps didn't fully conversant as to the whole mechanics of SIL. And it is the delivery arrangement that this governor's report is designed to simplify. So I think that, you know, we are where we are. Next Monday there is a briefing, I believe, Aaron, if I'm not right, to all members so that their questions can be answered and total clarity as to how this process works. When this administration came into play in 2019, I had a conversation with the chief executive at the time and asked what the arrangements were for SIL, what was there and what's it going to be used for. And I was told I can't tell you that. And it was amazing to think that this potentially some 27 or 28 million that would generate from this thing were told, I'm sorry. And I said, well, how does it work? Who organises the distribution? And it was the chief executive at the time and certain managers, but it wasn't out to members, and that was wrong. But I think we've addressed that in the right way. I think that the SIL panel has worked extremely well, making sure that all parts of the district receive funding where it's applicable. And we can cite the railway at Battle and the surgery at Robertsbridge just being two items which are of £1 million each. So I think the SIL panel has worked well. It is continuing to work well. And I think we're very, very fortunate in having a very efficient SIL manager who's been able to work very, very closely with the senior leadership team and the SIL panel. Ash, I beg your pardon.
No, thank you. No, I was just going to say, as one of the original SIL panel members as well, that I fully echo Councillor Bayliss's comments around, you know, where it's come from and where we are now. I think it's important to note that it was right at the time, but you have to move with the times and, you know, reevaluate what's current now. And I think the proposal on the table now is right for now. Thank you.
Councillor Barnes.
Chairman, I think the timing of this is unfortunate because if you look at many of the projects that are going to serve the whole of Rother, the leisure centre is a good example, then are going to be funded out of the levelling up money. There is a good deal of feeling in Ralk that this will tend to favour the larger projects. It's not so much a Bexhill-Rother feeling, although there is some of that around, but there is a feeling that is rather confirmed by the document that was sent out today, that there seems to be at the moment quite a large number of projects located within Bexhill, but a singular absence of some of the ones that are really going to be essential. If you look, for example, at what is happening in primary care, and the government is going to switch quite a lot of money from hospitals into the primary care sector, there are a number of projects which will actually be needed to deliver those clinics. We know, for example, the Burwash surgery cannot at the moment deliver the pain clinics which the PNC wants to see delivered because it does not have the rooms. Burwash has a project for a community hub. It doesn't figure in the infrastructure development plan. If I take another one, which is even more crucial, the A21, the only mention of the A21 in the entire IDP is misspelt. That can be corrected. It's the Cooper's Corner roundabout. But actually, anybody who knows the A21 will tell you the most crucial thing to have is going to be the Flimwell bypass, which will allow you to reopen the dual carriageway to the north. That is not mentioned in the IDP at all. In the morning, on the A265 where it joins the A21, you cannot actually get out onto the A21 in either direction because the traffic through Hurst Green is so massive. We either need traffic lights there or we need a mini roundabout.
Excuse me, Councillor, but you are drifting away from what I was really wanting to be discussing. You're giving specific examples of the IDP, whereas I like to feel as though we can identify the mechanical process, and I feel that's what we've asked officers to come forward.
I'm identifying the mechanical process. One of the problems, it seems to me, and it could be addressed in another way, but we thought it was quite sensible for the sake of fairness and transparency to keep the two funds. We actually took a long step to say that drawing on both funds was already possible, but we made the wording even clearer, and this was a unanimous recommendation that you should keep, for transparency's sake, the two funds. I have to say, the IDP, we are consulting with the infrastructure providers. We're not actually consulting with the parish councils, even though many of their projects will be more than 30,000. The kind of thing that I'm talking about, the Flimwell bypass or a mini roundabout at Hurst Green, are far beyond the capacity of any parish council to do, and do need to actually be either in the document, in which case, if the IDP had been sent out to the parish councils, they might well have put those projects in, and then we would have been less worried, I think, about the Rural and Urban Fund. But I have to say there is a great deal of worry out there in the parish councils.
I'm not sure there should be any worry. Aaron, is this something which you would just be able to identify in some degree of clarity, please?
Yeah, sure. So the IDP Councillor Barnes is referring to is currently out for consultation as part of the draft local plan. So there may well, and it's highly likely, that there are items that should be on there that are not currently on there, and that's the process that we're going through at the moment, is trying to identify as many of those items as possible, and while we're going through that process in the background, update the SIL governance arrangements so that once we have a working IDP, we can begin allocating money more effectively to that infrastructure.
Thanks for that clarity. Right, where are we? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Am I incorrect in thinking that it was separated originally to make it a fairer system for rural Rother and Bexhill, and it's only been in place for 2 years?
Aaron, are you able to pick that question up all right, did you?
Yep, sure. So yeah, it was originally, so I just want to be completely clear first off that we're only talking about the Rother Infrastructure Fund here, not the Matched Infrastructure Fund. The Matched Infrastructure Fund is the one that's for use by town and parish councils. That remains subdivided into a fund for Bexhill and a fund for rural Rother. And the reason why that one remains subdivided is because that's a much fairer process, because we're talking about local infrastructure being funded from those funding pots. So it would make a lot of sense that money that's generated in the rural areas stays for local infrastructure in the rural areas, and money in Bexhill goes to local infrastructure in Bexhill. So the funding pot that we're discussing here is the Rother Infrastructure Fund. This is only for use by infrastructure providers. Yes, initially under the current governance arrangements, it has been split into, as with the matched fund, it's been split into sub-fund for Bexhill and a sub-fund for rural Rother. And I think the initial thinking behind that was the same as for the matched fund. You know, let's ensure that SIL that's being generated in Bexhill stays in Bexhill, still in the rural areas stays in the rural areas. But what the panel has found through the last few years of funding items is that many of the items are actually strategic in the sense that they have direct benefits to one area, but also they may have indirect and other additional positive benefits to other areas across the district. Therefore, it would be better to have the funding pots combined, and therefore we've just got a greater amount of money available to allocate to those projects. And yes, it's true that the panel has only been running for 2 years, so this may seem somewhat premature that we're going through a governance review of it at the moment. However, the panel has allocated a fair amount of the SIL that's been collected so far. So I think what we're doing here with the review is essentially having a slight pause for a moment so that we can ensure that we're not allocating SIL too quickly to not be able to deliver many of the key infrastructure projects that are listed on the IDP.
Thank you, Alan. Paul?
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
sorry.
you, Alan.
Okay, jolly good. Thank you. Councillor Paul Osborne. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As you said, we gave it a fair hearing, to be honest, for quite some time. It is a complex sort of thing, if you like. It's a bit of a complex beast to try and get your head round. You know, I'm on the SIL panel, so I sort of get it, but other members aren't, and it was an awkward one. I think the briefing we requested, which Aaron's going to do for us next Monday, will be very useful, because the week after we're discussing this at full council. So I think that would be very useful to sort of bring members up to speed with the whole sort of issue and the sub-funds and the funds and everything else of SIL. I think that one of the sort of the biggest concerns seem to be public perception. You know, it's always, you know, I sort of get it, if you know what I mean, that, you know, this is the fund for Rother infrastructure that's in the local plan. But by changing it to from country and town, sort of rural and town, sort of to one pot, was the concern was it you know, then people say, oh, it's all spent in Bexhill. We know it's not. You know, I've got funding coming into my own patch in Canberra. One of the recent ones you mentioned was Robertsbridge surgery, where we sort of pinched, if you like, some money from Bexhill to sort of fund that, to put that together. And the Bexhill station, which has been on the list for years and years and years. You know, these affect everybody. So, you know, I sort of get it. I think the briefing will be very useful for members next week. I think I won't say any more. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think it's quite obvious, looking at some of the questions that were coming out from members last Monday, that the briefing, perhaps in hindsight, should have been before that presentation of this report, but there has been quite a bit of work that needs to be done. Christine, did you want to add something?
Yes, I do. And thank you to Councillor Osborne for clarifying the sort of route of the not disagreement, but the alternative view of the overview and scrutiny. I think if public perceptions are the issue here, then we need to address that properly and make sure that people understand how SIL is allocated and as I say, the way the mechanics of how we do it shouldn't, you know, needs to be updated. It's a separate issue. So I I would suggest that we vote.
Thank you. So we've had it moved. Did you want to add anything more, Teresa? No. We've had a second. Those in favour of retaining the arrangements as per prior to the amendment that's come through from Sue. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Are you going to stay with us, Aaron, or would you like to...
I've got 2 young children at home, so I think I'll head back.
Yes.
Thank you, then.
You might be better.
Yeah, maybe I should stay, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next item is agenda item 8. Again, reference coming from scrutiny last Monday. This is Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officers Report. Are you presenting it? Ash, thank you. So, noting of the draft financial outturn 23-24.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's to note the draft financial outturn for 23-24 based on the expenditure and income to 31st of March, considered by overview and scrutiny at its meeting on the 8th of July. So the report and recommendation arising are reproduced below in the minutes and should be read in conjunction with that report as well. So the recommendations, it's been resolved that Cabinet be requested to approve the provisional outturn position for the General Fund Revenue Account for 23-24 be approved. Financing of the 23-24 capital programme along with the updated capital programme for 24-25 up to 28-29 and scheme financing as outlined within the report and detailed in Appendix B be approved, and also that the final reserve transfers in Appendix C be approved. So the draft revenue outturn for the 23-24 shows an overall deficit of 2.25 million, which is slightly higher than the approved planned use of reserves. So this is partly due to the business rate volatility reserve funding, without which the variance would have been significantly higher. So council tax collection rates were better than last year, so that's positive. But on the flip side, the business rates were down due to the economic situation. Key message here is that while the position has improved since Q3, we still have used over 2 million of reserves in 23-24. So we're still drawing from reserves rather than replenishing them, so there's an increased need and urgency to embrace the Fit for the Future programme objectives that were laid out in the draft council plan and captured in the service plans across the council departments, and to record and monitor their effectiveness with more heightened discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ash. Catherine, Councillor Field.
Thank you, yes, and thank you very much for the report and the introduction. My slight quibble is with recommendation 1. We're asked to approve the outturn. If we're approving it, there's an implication that we could perhaps not approve it, but as it's already happened, that isn't an option, so I think we should be noting it, not approving it.
Yeah. I'm sure that could be incorporated, that we're noting it as opposed to approving it.
Makes more sense, grammatically.
Yeah. Andrew, did you want to make any further observations, please?
Just to say there sort of will be a bit of a theme this evening in terms of that's 2 million out of the reserves. We get to the in-year position, another 3 million out of the reserves. So the reserves are now down, predicted for the end of the year, down to 7 million. So we've spent nearly half the reserves in 2 years. You don't need me to say we can't keep going on like that. So we just need to tighten up, find some more income, be more disciplined. The issue in this paper was that the previous savings programme in here didn't work. The devolution to the parishes, etc., didn't deliver the savings. There was over £1 million not achieved there. That was offset by increased investment income because interest rates are high at the minute, but that is a temporary fix. So some of the things, and the business rates, as Ash mentioned, that have helped as well, they are temporary fixes that we cannot keep repeating. Interest rates will come down, we will spend that. The cash we've got in the bank on the massive capital programme that's also on this agenda later, so that won't be there in future years to bail out the income either. So just to flag up that by the time we get to the budget in the autumn, the MTFP, I need to pull all these reports tonight together to provide a way forward that is sustainable and keeps reserves at a sustainable level, and hopefully in the longer term starts to build them up again. So that is sort of just the common theme for all the papers, really.
Yeah, thank you for those observations. Yeah, it's very much work in progress, and there's a long way to go. But collaborative working with officers, members supporting recommendations of how we're going to achieve this is a very, very important way forward. Are there any other questions? No? Okay. Ash, you're going to move this report to be noted. Yeah. And if I've got someone that can second that. Hazel, Teresa, thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 9. So this carries on with the Andrew and Ash show. To note the financial position and forecast outturn for 24-25. The report is to be noted. Ash?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this report to be noting again. So this report updates the financial position as at the 31st of May and projects a provisional outturn for 24-25. Revenue budget and capital programme statements are summarised in the appendices A and B, and the impact of the forecast to reserves is summarised in Appendix C. So this shows a projected overspend for the year of 929,000. I think the caveat with that is that it's still very early on in the year, especially for income projections. Due to a number of factors, really, the most significant of those factors being the staff pay rise, the interim team in terms of the monitoring officer, HR, finance and planning, and also another factor is the reduction in income from planning and car parks. So overall, it's another 3 million off the reserves. So as Andrew mentioned, we're down to 7 million projected by year end. So actions are required to reduce the in-year deficit, in addition to the ongoing monitoring of the savings by overview and scrutiny. Attached in Appendix D is the first savings assurance report for 24-25, and that was received by scrutiny on the 8th of July. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Andrew, would you like to make any observations, please?
Just to stress, as Ash said, it's very early in the year. So, for example, the car park income figure, to take with a pinch of salt at the minute, heavily dependent on the weather over the summer holiday period for income at Canberra and stuff like that. So we'll have a more meaningful figure in areas like that in September when we've had our peak income period. But it is quite worrying that despite officers making their savings, which is the focus of the ONS report in Appendix D, there is creeping expenditure in other areas, and we need to clamp down on that. Again, linking to other reports on the agenda tonight, Tim's got a report on the officer restructure, which will hopefully mean most of these interim posts will disappear and be replaced by permanent staff. So that, that all these reports do link together, and hopefully we'll tackle the problem eventually.
Thank you, Andrew. It is a big piece of work. We know that we've got to do it, and it won't happen overnight. It's something that the plans need to be in place, in situ, in the building blocks, in order to take us where we want to be. Christine.
Yes, I just wondered if this might be an opportunity, given we've got a new government, to see what other authorities through the local government association or district council network, what lobbying is taking place. I understand that new ministers have voiced acknowledgement or an acknowledgement of the situation for local authorities up and down the country, and it would be, I think, useful just to sort of make sure that we've added our voice in there.
Yes, I'm sure that's the case, Andrew. Yes, thank you for that. Paul, Councillor Paul Osborne.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, we just to sort of reiterate that the Appendix D, which is the savings assurance report that Andrew's put together, that will come to each and every scrutiny committee when we meet to see how these savings are going on. So that is sort of one of their sort of bread and butter jobs now, if you like, to sort of keep an eye on where the savings or not are sort of being sought. Just on what Christine said, the county council was at a parish council meeting last week, and he said, you know, their sort of concern for next year at a county level is somewhere between, I think he said 30 or 40 million sort of overspend, and they've sort of saved and scrimped about as much as they can. So the sort of figures that they're talking about are massive compared to ours, but equally, as Andrew said at scrutiny meeting, if we can't afford to keep taking £2 million out of the budget, because in 3 years' time there won't be any left to take out. So, you know, will a change of government bring a change of bringing the assistance? Who knows? We can possibly only hope, but you know, the pressures are upon us to spend money to support people, but equally, where does it come from? So it's not easy, Chairman. Thank you.
No, indeed not. Councillor John Barnes. John?
Yes, I'm totally in favour of lobbying the government, but I don't think you're going to get very far. I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but all the indications from the Chancellor of the Exchequer were that they might give us a 3-year settlement, which itself will be helpful, but there's going to be no more money. If there is more money, I suspect it will go to social care, because that actually is an important part of the health service returns. And we, of course, are not a social care authority. So I think we do need to really back everything that the officer team are doing to actually find more efficient ways of delivering what we're doing and to deliver what is essential. Because 5%, which is the minimum level which is indicated to us, is in fact around about a third of a year's expenditure. The parish councils are themselves recommended to keep half. So we actually are less prudent than our parish councils in terms of reserves. And it does seem to me that what is going on the savings plan is likely to be delivered. What is worrying is suddenly additional spending showing itself, which is totally unexpected and has knocked us off course. And I think, therefore, the savings programme will have to be slightly larger than the one originally projected in order to cope with these unexpected things.
Thank you, and I'm sure Andrew will be very much aware of that. So this particular report, Ash, move it to be noted. Second, Teresa, those in favour of confirming that the monitoring report be noted. Just remind me where we are. Agenda item 10. Ash again. This is the capital programme update. Update and perspective of our capital programme, along with a more detailed understanding of the status of some of the more significant schemes. Ash, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is around the capital programme. So the Council has a significant capital programme of 247 million, and this can be seen in Appendix B within the budget monitoring report. So a large proportion of this value-wise of the scheme within the programmes was based on business cases that were approved several years ago. So as we know, the financial landscape, however, has changed very significantly over that period, both in terms of the wider national and international economic position, and also more locally in relation to council finances, which, as we've already mentioned, has seen reserves continuing to reduce over that period. So over the last 18 months, Several of the schemes have been paused as the future position has been very unclear due to a number of reasons outlined. So this report has basically been put together to really indicate an update on the position of the capital programme, provide some further detail on some of the more significant schemes, and ensure that there's a wider understanding of the challenges and pressures being faced in terms of delivering an affordable capital programme. So as already mentioned, the programme is currently sitting at 247 million, with a balance of 195 million to be spent over future financial years. So this is huge for a small district such as Rother. It's therefore vital that members better understand the schemes contained within the programme and the levels of risk and opportunity which they present to us as an authority. So given the size of the programme, which is almost 5 times the size of our gross revenue budget, more rigour and scrutiny is needed to be placed on these schemes and their progress, as well as any future schemes that come forward. There are therefore several governance, monitoring and assessment improvements being embedded to support with the delivery of these improvements. This will be reviewed to ensure that the revenue costs are affordable and will be reported in the next MTFP, which will be around October-November time. This report also includes consideration for the resource requirements, which will help us ensure that we're able to deliver on all of these improvements outlined above. Members are therefore asked to note the contents of the report and the improvement proposals contained, and to support the required budget proposals for the establishment of the development programme team. The new team would replace our current interns at a significantly lower cost. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Andrew?
Just to reiterate, by the autumn, the first step of the budget will be a review of the revenue consequences of this entire capital programme, the funding of it. So obviously some of it's coming from levelling up monies, some of it's coming from other grants. Some of it hopefully will come from sale of assets, and that feeds into another report here later on in terms of the Strategic Asset Management Programme. What we can't afford to do is borrow the best part of £200 million. At the minute, interest rates from PWB are around 5%. You then have to sort of deduct the MRP, the premium payments, in effect of another at least 2% minimum, so that's 7%. 7% of £200 million is £14 million. That's nearly your entire revenue budget. You cannot afford very much borrowing at all, if I'm honest, at this minute. So we will review the capital programme, the financial consequences for the revenue account by the time of the MTFP. So when I come to present the MTFP, we will only have an affordable capital programme with all the revenue consequences laid out and all the funding laid out, so that I can assure you that the programme is sustainable and wouldn't bankrupt the authority, which is obviously my main concern at the minute. It's having too big a capital programme that's got a lot of authorities into Section 114 territory. Obviously, I wish to avoid that.
Thank you, Andrew. It's absolutely vital that we get our house in order. It's absolutely vital that we know really where we're going and what is sustainable, what is possible, and if we have to put things on hold, then things are put on hold. But I think the identity, the senior leadership team have wanted to restructure, very much Lorna wanted to restructure so that we've got the right people in situ and that we're not reliant on interim posts externally, because that costs an awful lot of money. This is the start of it all. I think that we've got to move ourselves forward. And when you look under we've got a lot of these posts that have been filled already, I believe, it doesn't give us that reliance on paying external funding. I think that Ash has moved this. Does anyone like to second this report? Christine, thank you. And if you could vote on this, please, so that the senior leadership team can move forward on the restructuring. The sooner we start, the better. Thank you very much indeed, Ash and Andrew. Right, we move forward to agenda item 11. This is the Rother Strategic Asset Management Plan 2024. It's Joe's report. Are you presenting it, Joe, or Christine's? Yeah, please do.
Yes, thank you very much. And actually, this is really good that it follows on from the last report, because I think it gives you the right sort of context about why we're developing this revised or updated strategic asset management plan. So the council has not had a form of fit for purpose strategic action management plan that it's been working to for some time. It's essential that we better understand our assets, given the financial pressures we are facing. A better understanding of current and future maintenance costs will help us develop a more coherent approach to prioritising investment opportunities. The effective acquisition, development, management and disposal of the asset portfolio will help mitigate risk, maximise income and enable the delivery of organisational objectives. The report considers that how such a plan can be developed. In particular, the plan should be seen within the context of the Council's wider approach to the management of its capital budgets and capital investment and treasury management strategy 2004 to 2005. So in the detail of the report, you've got asset management plan which will help the authority provide an investment and disposal framework to inform future decision making. And a really good example of the investment is that the council recently used some of the money that it received from the Levelling Up Partnership money to purchase the Edinburgh Woolen Mill, which is promises in Devonshire Road. And that will be used for a community hub, which enables us to deliver on our anti-poverty objectives. It will minimise carbon emissions to support the council's net zero aspirations. So that will be a really important part of the plan. Understand maintenance and repair priorities, improve income generation, and support the council to meet its statutory compliance obligations, and identify resource and skills requirements and proposals to address these. The estates team at Rother is small. At Appendix A, it includes the analysis of the team and provides an illustration of how the team could be resourced for the future if the council is going to meet its action plan objectives effectively and within the time frames indicated. So the report considers how a strategic asset management plan could be developed and presented to future committee meetings as part of the council's wider approach to the management of its capital budgets. And as I say, a really good follow-on from the report that Ash has just presented. There is one area or one amendment, and that's to paragraph 13 of the actual proposed plan, where it talks about disposal of assets being under section 123 of the Local Government Act 1972, which of course is the bit of the Act that it means that we must always obtain best value. But of course that was updated by the Localism Act of 2011, which set out certain circumstances where we could take into consideration other objectives other than financial objectives. But as I say, the thrust of the report is about making sure that we get the best out of our assets, reduce our expenditure, and return the council to financial health.
Thank you, Christine. Anybody else want to make a comment? So are we going to... Sorry, yes, go on. Yeah, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. And thank you very much to Councillor Bayliss for her introduction and for mentioning paragraph 13, because as you know, I have views about certain of our assets which I think could be disposed of differently than is currently what we do. I'm not going to name them, but you all know what I'm talking about. I think it's really helpful to have this plan. I think it's good to see our assets set out and good to know what we're supposed to be doing with them. I would just add, though, that I think it's really important that there is some flexibility in this, because we need to be able to move quickly and effectively, should anything arise which we think might like to become one of our assets, or that we might need to dispose of. So again, need to hit the ground running on many items, but very good plan, and I'm delighted to see it here. Thank you.
Councillor Coleman, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the term is assets, and they should all be assets, and they should have benefits, whether that's financial or social. And certainly, the Edinburgh Woolen Mill site is a really good example of that social benefit. And following through on our anti-poverty strategy. But I think without properly planning and setting out what your assets are, where there are opportunities for more assets, and where there may be not so much assets as burdens, that makes sure that we're getting the most out of them, and that they are assets rather than just things that we're calling assets, but are just a long list of things we own or whatever. So I think this is a really positive step forward.
Yeah, it's an excellent piece of work that we needed to bring forward. It's been on the blocks for quite some little while, but in fairness, we haven't had the officer resources to be able to attend to it, and this is part of the work that Joe and the team have been doing. Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to briefly add, just to thank Duncan as well for his support with putting this report together. It's been challenging coming in to this, taking over this area of work last year to understand the level of activity that this team was undertaking, particularly our former colleague Graham Burgess, and the level of work he had to take on, which has now become a whole programme of activity in the capital programme, which we're funding separately. A lot of that work was left to him as an individual, from what I could understand at the time. So it's taken some time to separate that work out from this asset understanding and management. The extent to which the council's data and information on its assets is not where it needs to be stressed as well. So we are going to be starting at the beginning to a degree, not completely. We've got a good understanding, but it could be better. So I just wanted to underline that the progress on this will be not slow as such, but it will be intentional. But there's a journey to go on to get us to a point where we understand this better. In the interim, there is a more urgent requirement to have an approach to disposals, particularly to speak back to Andrew's point around the capital programme, urgently. And so therefore, I just wanted to inject that sense of urgency to this. We don't sit on a bank of very high value assets. We've got lots of little assets that have some value, some of which are in high value areas for housing, for example, some of which are not. So I didn't want to give the impression that we have so much choice at the moment, given the financial position, about what we do with these assets. Historically, we've been quite minded, as quite rightly, to support community uses, support socio-economic outcomes. But to achieve that, we need to have a sound financial foundation. So we will be bringing forward disposal plans that look to offset the costs of the capital programme. So I wanted to really manage that expectation at the outset. That's what this is going to look like. And it's going to be, we need to get rid of X, Y, and Z if we want to fund the other activity. So I just wanted to be really clear about the position, because it is in the report, but to tease that out, because I think it's a bit of a sea change.
Thank you, Joe. I think we've grasped that, and I think the fact is that it's long overdue that we had this sort of review structure within the council. We were going nowhere. We were just, we're just meandering along and really doubling back on ourselves. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm sort of, if you like, I'll sort of carry on a little bit from what Councillor Field said. We have sort of a number of assets that you could call assets that we currently have closed, namely some public conveniences. Now, some parishes are sort of expressing interest in taking them on, but they want to take them on a freehold basis so that they can then sort of invest and get loans or grants or whatever. We're only offering freehold basis. So I'm hoping that with sort of one of the last things Joe said is that we have assets which don't have a lot of value. And my thoughts would be, well, if we've got assets which don't have a value and almost a sort of a millstone around their neck, is that not better? Get them gone, get them off the books to the parish councils so that they can do as they wish. Obviously, if they're going to sell one for £500,000 and build 3 houses on it, we want a bit of uplifting value. But pretty much, you know, a public convenience on a beach is just that. And I would be much happier that this council shifted them from our balance books or from our spreadsheet, if you like, onto the parish councils if they want them. Parish councils can then run them as they see fit. And we, as you said in the previous report, you know, we can invest in what we see as useful for the district and the whole district and the council in bringing income in through investment. So that's what I would look at. Thanks, Chair.
Yep, thank you, Paul. That is being looked at. I can assure you that is being looked at now, because we're in a situation where we can identify, once we know the value of these units, we can see whether or not the parish councils want to buy them or whatever it might be, and that would include the freehold. So, you know, that is a way forward, because I think we've identified that, and I think that's an important way of looking at it. No other questions? Sorry, Andrew? Christine?
I was just going to respond to Councillor Osborne to say that, you know, for that reason, I put forward that amendment to paragraph 13, which, you know, will enable that to happen if the council should decide. They can take a balance between the sort of capital value or of the value of an asset against the value of keeping that particular service open and transferring it to a local authority.
Yeah, we haven't completed that work yet, so the valuation is work in progress at this moment in time. But once we're able to complete that, one can then make those sort of movements forward. Catherine.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Bayliss is talking about an amendment rather than just an explanation, which I thought is what she was saying in the first place. Councillor Bayliss would like to propose a formal amendment to that paragraph. I am very happy to second it, unless, Leader, you think we can just record the conversation and proceed on that basis.
Make a comment, Joe, before we...
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just wanted to reassure members that when we make a best value judgment, we take to members that it's within your gift to decide which valuation you would want to, on an asset-by-asset basis, given the lack of strategic asset management plan presently, what the outcome is that you want for that asset and what the uses you want for that asset, the receipts almost. So to an extent, these are processes that we follow and we can choose to use. So it's a statement of what we can do, which we already have in law. I would be reluctant to make changes without legal input on something of that regard. I'm no expert in this area. I can assure you, though, that when it comes to Section 123 valuations and best value, Localism Act is considered. The whole thing is considered quite a complex assessment. So I would want to reassure you, really, that there may be perhaps no need to amend it as such.
Perhaps I could just invite Andrew on that, and if we can take this away and then make sure that we've got that clearly recorded as to the process. Because presumably if we are selling off assets, you would have to sign it off ultimately. So, you know, we couldn't sell things off just because there was a desire to do so, because at the end of the day, you're responsible, Andrew, I believe.
Yes, I am. Just to reiterate, you know, just probably back up what Joe's just said, and we take all those things into consideration. It sounds like a stuck record, really, but yeah, when you see the funding of the programme in the autumn, you will see that we need to make a lot of money from our assets because we're not going to be able to afford to borrow to fund most of the programme. So this is really, really important now.
But if this is coming forward off the back of perhaps town and parishes wanting to acquire toilets, for example, there's no reason why we can't explore that going forward in readiness, because I think that's a way of doing it. Prepared for that. They can buy it off.
I would just say, just to provide some confidence to members, it would be good to mention that the Localism Act 2011, because it does, it supersedes the Local Government Act 1972. It provides an alternative to always having to provide best value. So this was all part of the, David Cameron's Big Society initiative, going back to the very early Conservative governments of 2010 to 15, something that I know most people supported during that period, and I just would like to see it mentioned in that paragraph.
Hazel,
yeah, thank you, Chair. As a portfolio holder for the items under question, I think we need to bear in mind and listen to what Andrew is saying, because we have to get best value. And if best value means selling them at their market rate, and then anyone can buy them. So, that is the issue here. Not that we are not going to consider the social things, but we really can't just push aside the fact that we really need to get money from our assets. And that is the end. That is really the question.
I don't think you have to endorse that. I think obviously we have to get the right value for something. Andrew wouldn't allow us to flog off assets below market value. But if there's a valuation and there's somebody who wants to buy it at that valuation, then we can push on with it. Joe?
Councillor Bayliss and I did discuss this before the meeting, so I perhaps misunderstood the full context. Perhaps a reference, would it be satisfactory to say a reference to the Localism Act will be made as part of any assessment? That be adequate? Yeah. Then I don't see an issue with that. Yeah, great, good.
A practical way of dealing with what we want to get across, yeah? John, sorry.
Yes, just to return really to Councillor Osborne's point. It's been quite difficult to persuade parish councils to take over certain assets on a leasehold basis because they take on quite a bit of a liability in terms of running cost. And it's very hard to get grants if you only have a leasehold. I know this from Burwash. And so finding some way of actually using perhaps an overage agreement in order to get rid of the freehold to prevent the parish council from exploiting the situation would be sensible and would make, I think, transfer of assets very much more easy, and therefore we will begin to make the kind of savings that we need to make on the running of certain of these assets.
I don't think we have to remind Andrew of being very astute and mercenary as far as you can go to make sure we can get best value all the time. So there's an amendment with regard to that, which I think you've got wording. Yeah, good, okay. So this report be resolved that the asset management proposal be noted, intention of the SAMP updates to come to committee as part of the capital structure, whatever. Strategy reports in the future be approved. I think you're going to move this report, Christine, and I think that Ash will second that. Thanks very much for the work that's gone into this. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Right, where are we, Louise? That was 11, wasn't it? So we've now gone to a situation where the following items, that's item 13, 14, 15 and 16, will be the exclusion of press and public, so the following items, material exempt from publication. Do I need to read all that through? No, I don't need to read it all, fair enough. Okay, so those online, unfortunately, will not be part of this, this report. Yes, indeed so. So I need an agreement that we're going to exclude those. Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you online for joining us this evening, and I'm sorry that for whatever reason you can't continue to participate in the discussion of these items that are coming up. Okay, so that's the end of tonight's Cabinet meeting, and we're closing the meeting at 8:35. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.